Welcome back everyone, it's Rob McFarlane here, and today we're going to be going through some techniques I've used before to come up with some brand new story ideas. Epiphanies don't kind of come along when you want them to, and when you are trying to come up with a story idea, they don't always just go, poof, here you go, here's a great idea. Instead, for me anyway, it always feels like a struggle. Very similar to Aaron Sorkin, actually. He always talks about having constant writer's block, and I think this is something which a lot of people really struggle through. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's actually just part and parcel of the writer's journey. At some point, you will have writer's block. So what can we do about that? So much like my previous episode where I looked at some of the things I was trying to do to come up with a brand new story idea, today's episode I'm actually going to be using some pen and paper methods to see if we can come up with something brand new and really cool immediately. So the first technique we're going to use is the mind matrix. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's essentially a big grid with tons of ideas, and then you take a random idea from each column and piece them together in a creative way. What this does is it allows you the chance to, at random, start to generate connections between seemingly random concepts, ideas, objects, characters, and build stories around them. This can be an amazing way for you to actually come up with truly unique concepts that have still got a lot to do with you personally, because you get to choose everything that actually goes into the matrix. This is not random, this is not someone else choosing these things for you. This can be designed around the things that you actually want to talk about already, yet it's still random enough to enable you to develop something creative and unique from it. So let's give it a go. Focus is looking good. We have our blank sheet of potential concepts in front of us. First thing we need to do is turn it into a grid. Don't worry about being too precious with this. This is literally just going to be for you. It's not going to be framed. 7 columns, give myself enough space to write. And then I'm going to create 10 rows. The rows are going to constitute each concept or idea that you have for that particular column. Wonderful. Okay, so now you're going to headline your columns. Now, you don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing. You might have different ideas and concepts with this, but these are the ones that I like to use and I've used in the past to help jog some inspiration and creativity. So, first things first, let's come up with a character. You know, just a generic character. Then we might come up with a trait for that character. Maybe we'll have a location, weakness, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be for the character, but again, we're just going to put things down for us to start pulling ideas and concepts together. We're going to have a prop, genre, the moral, or message. This looks great. So we're going to come up with 10 different characters. Now, these characters could be based around, maybe you already know you want to do sci-fi and it's got to be a space horror. Well, in which case you probably want to do characters you expect to see within that genre, such as a doctor or a captain or engineer. But for our sake, I'm going to go completely random so we can come up with something totally new. So let's start off with maybe a teacher. Maybe, we'll do an engineer. A recluse. It doesn't always have to be their job, but it's still a particular character. We get some idea of what type of overriding characteristics and traits that they have. Police. Please don't worry about your handwriting, I'm not. A barber. A labourer. Chat show host. I know there's only 10 characters and you could probably think of a million more characters you could put in, but don't forget, these things are just a guide to start the process of creating. So let's now move on to the next column. Now, the next column does not have to correlate with the first column. In fact, do not consider the first column when you're coming up with your second column, third column, fourth column, fifth column, whatever. You've got to be as loose and free with this as you possibly can. So now, traits. Traits could be just defining characteristics like fastidious. Maybe they're sarcastic. Maybe they're humorous, conceited, frivolous. Now we get to locations. You don't want to start saying like bedroom or bathroom. Start to think about a home, or maybe a prison or a restaurant. So thinking of the entire location, not just the room within it, but a space that you can actually travel through and means something for a story. A hotel. You see how home and hotel, they both have toilets, they both have bedrooms, they both have kitchens within, they both have utility spaces. However, they actually denote two totally different things when it comes to your story. Also, you see here how I put a restaurant and a prison. I didn't go hyper specific about what type of restaurant. It could be a fast food restaurant, or it could be a Chinese restaurant. I was a little more ambiguous so I could be a little more interpretive. When I do actually start to piece these concepts and ideas together, I can say, oh, hang on, maybe this teacher loves Chinese food, and I end up in a Chinese restaurant. Or maybe this teacher is a vegan and they end up in a steakhouse. Well, now, because I've left that location open a little bit, I've already been able to create a sense of conflict from just those two things. You know what? I'm going to make a change to my matrix. And you can do that. I'm going to get rid of genre, because I think I can come up with genre maybe a little later. Instead, I'm going to put in here a desire. Yeah, cool. Let's make sure I really can't see the word genre. Don't forget, in one of my previous episodes, I do talk about character traits and coming up with weaknesses which are actually really true to your character. And one of them is actually take a positive trait too far. That's a fantastic way of creating a weakness in your characters, and I thoroughly recommend that whenever you're thinking about how can my character have a really deep-seated flaw or weakness that they find it very difficult to get through. Go with something positive taken to an extreme, because almost anything taken to an extreme becomes a negative. Gregarious, kindness, OCD, attention seeking. So we've got some weaknesses, and now we're going to move. Oh, hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, I've only been doing 9s. Well, you know what? That's fine. If you're going to only come up with 9 or 8 or even 5, this will still work. We filled out all of the columns. We've got everything in here that we need to come up with a story. This is also where you get the chance to flex your creative muscles, create a story from seemingly random elements that go together to create a film. So let's use our mind matrix and come up with a story. The chat show host. Interesting. I recently watched The Joker, so I'm thinking that probably shouldn't go too close to that type of chat show. Next random is humorous. Maybe the chat show host uses humor as a way of keeping themselves safe. Someone who tells jokes at the expense of someone else to divert attention away from people judging them for their own actions. So that's interesting. Immediately, by just putting humorous, there's different versions of humor that we can attach to the chat show host. So let's move on to the next column. Prison. Maybe he runs a chat show from prison. He's a prisoner that's become famous for doing interesting interviews. Or maybe the chat show host has found themselves in prison for something that they've done. Okay, let's see if some other elements from our matrix can start to fill in those gaps. Their weakness. They're impatient. So maybe their impatience is what got them into prison. Maybe they did something because they were looking for fame and fortune, and their impatience forced them to do something that was maybe risky or illegal to try and achieve that fame and fortune sooner, but they didn't get away with it. Motorbike. So maybe it was a motorbike accident that got the chat show host in prison. They did a stunt, or they tried to pull a humorous stunt with a motorbike and ended up in a tragedy, and then they are the ones who've ended up in prison. Okay, so you see how each of these elements start to compound upon each other, adding different facets, different dimensions to the story that you can tell. Their desire. Fulfillment. Fulfillment could be an interesting one, because if they believe that fulfillment comes from being recognized and being famous, yes, so if their desire is fulfillment, they want to be recognized. So they want the fame and fortune at whatever cost. That's their desire. Is to appreciate what you have. Maybe by the chat show host realizing how to appreciate what they have, they end up finding the fulfillment by changing the way they make a show, and it actually resonating with people on a far deeper level than the humorous and very shallow show that they were running previously. Maybe it is that the chat show host starts a show from within the prison, and that is how they find their fulfillment. They realize that they can bring so much more to the world than they had before, because now they appreciate the other humans within it, the people next to them, rather than only thinking of themselves. So right there, we have actually a pretty interesting story of redemption from one A4 page of Mind Matrix. I think that was pretty successful. So what I've learned from this process of doing a mind matrix, yes, it was on a random set of various things. It's very directable, because ultimately you're drawn towards the things which excite you. And if you've already got a few ideas that you know, I want to do something that's on this or has this type of character in it, then you can put that into your mind matrix. But I do believe that by doing the mind matrix first, you come up with a far more holistic, far more multifaceted idea than if you are to just think about something and have a cool kind of vision or scene that you want to try and work the film towards. I think this is definitely going to be something that I use for my film going forward. Who knows, I may even write the film that I just came up with as well, which would be really cool. I've also realized just how important it is in the mind matrix, and I think if you're going to keep any of the columns that I wrote, I really think probably the key areas that really pulled this film idea together was the character, weakness, and moral message. I think as long as you have those three, you can add in other elements, props, locations, other characters, antagonist. But I think those three should be in any mind matrix you do to come up with your next script. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed today's content, please hit subscribe, smash the like button, send me any comments if you've got any of your own versions, or if you actually did do a mind matrix for your own film, and check out the links below for even more awesome content, as well as a Patreon where you can ask me questions which I can answer on this YouTube channel as well.